The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate Transylvanian landscape. I had spent years preparing for this moment, trained in the art of slaying the creatures of the night. I knew that tonight was the beginning of my most dangerous mission yet. Word had spread across the dark underbelly of Europe. Count Dracula was dead, slain by some unknown force. His castle, once a fortress of terror, now stood abandoned, a shadow of its former glory. But with the Count's death, chaos had erupted among the vampire clans, each one vying for control of the throne. I had been tracking the remnants of Dracula's followers for months, following their movements as they schemed and plotted. They had grown desperate, their once organized hierarchy crumbling into violence and treachery. And now, they had turned on each other, each coven seeking to claim the throne and the power that came with it. But I knew something they didn't. I had uncovered whispers of a secret heir, a child of Dracula himself, hidden away from even the most loyal of his servants. If true, this heir would hold the key to controlling the vampire world, or perhaps destroying it altogether. The forest was silent as I made my way to the ruins of Dracula's castle. The towering trees seemed to close in on me, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. As I approached the castle's entrance, the heavy wooden doors creaked open on their own, as if welcoming me into the darkness within. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls were lined with faded portraits, their eyes following me as I moved deeper into the castle. I had been here before, many years ago, when I first took up the mantle of a vampire hunter. Back then, I had been foolish, brash, and nearly met my end at the hands of Dracula's minions. But I had learned from those mistakes. Now, I was older, wiser, and determined to see this through. The castle was a labyrinth of corridors and hidden passages, each one more foreboding than the last. I made my way to the throne room, where I knew the final battle would take place. The room was vast and empty, save for the enormous stone throne that sat at its center. Blood-red tapestries hung from the walls, and the floor was stained with the remnants of past sacrifices. As I approached the throne, I felt a presence, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to seep into my very bones. I gripped my weapon tightly, ready for anything. But there was nothing. The room was empty, save for the shadows that danced in the flickering torchlight. I circled the throne, my senses on high alert. There was something off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, and then I saw it. A hidden compartment beneath the throne, its edges barely visible in the dim light. My heart raced as I knelt down, prying the compartment open with trembling hands. Inside was a small, ornate box, covered in intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and twist in the light. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts screaming at me to leave it be. But I had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, I opened the box. Inside was a letter, written in an elegant, flowing script. The words were in an ancient language, one that I had spent years studying. As I began to translate the text, a chill ran down my spine. The letter spoke of an heir, a child born of darkness, who would inherit Dracula's power and bring about a new age of terror. The letter detailed a prophecy, one that foretold the rise of this heir and the destruction that would follow. But what caught my attention was the final line, a line that seemed to be written in haste, as if the writer had been interrupted. It read, "The heir is closer than you think." The room seemed to grow colder, and the shadows deepened around me. I stood up, my mind racing. If the heir was indeed alive, they would be hunted by every vampire clan in existence. And if they fell into the wrong hands, the world as I knew it would be doomed. But as I turned to leave, the room suddenly erupted in chaos. The doors slammed shut with a deafening crash, and the torches were snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness. I heard a sound, a low, guttural growl that echoed through the chamber. My blood ran cold as I realized I was not alone. Something moved in the darkness, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. I could hear it breathing, could feel its eyes on me. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to locate the source of the sound, but the darkness was impenetrable. And then, without warning, it attacked. A flash of movement, a blur of shadow, and I was thrown across the room with a force that knocked the wind out of me. I hit the ground hard, my weapon skidding out of reach. Pain shot through my body as I struggled to get to my feet, but it was too late. The creature was upon me, its claws digging into my flesh as it dragged me toward the throne. I fought back with everything I had, but it was no use. The creature was too strong, too fast. It lifted me off the ground, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light as it prepared to strike the final blow. I braced myself for death, but at the last moment the creature hesitated. For a brief moment I saw something in its eyes, a flicker of recognition of something almost human. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature released me, disappearing into the shadows as if it had never been there at all. I lay on the cold stone floor gasping for breath, my mind reeling from the encounter. What had just happened? Why had the creature spared me? And more importantly, who or what was it? As I struggled to make sense of it all, one thing became clear. The hunt for Dracula's heir had just begun, and I was now caught in the middle of a deadly game, one that could end in my death or the destruction of everything I had ever known. But one thing was certain. I would find the heir, and when I did, I would have to make a choice. Destroy them, and end the bloodline once and for all, or use them to bring down the vampire clans from within. Little did I know, that choice would soon become more difficult than I could ever have imagined. The days following my encounter in the throne room were a blur of feverish nightmares and fragmented memories. I couldn't shake the image of that creature, its eyes glowing with something unearthly, yet familiar. I had scoured the castle for any signs of it, but it had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The only clue I had was the letter I found, now safely tucked into the inner pocket of my coat. The heir is closer than you think. The words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that I was running out of time. I left the castle at dawn, slipping into the shadows of the forest before any of Dracula's followers could track me. The vampire clans would soon discover the throne room had been breached, and they would stop at nothing to find the heir. My only advantage was that they didn't know I had the letter, or that I was hunting the same prize. But how long could I stay ahead of them? And who or what was this heir that everyone seemed so desperate to find? My journey led me to a small, isolated village nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains. The village had been ravaged by the war between the clans, its streets deserted, its buildings little more than crumbling ruins. The few villagers that remained eyed me with suspicion as I passed, their gaunt faces a testament to the fear that gripped them. They knew something was coming, something terrible, and so did I. My search brought me to a decrepit inn on the outskirts of the village. The innkeeper, a frail old man with eyes clouded by cataracts, barely acknowledged my presence as I entered. The place reeked of damp wood and stale air, but it was the only shelter I could find. I asked for a room, offering a handful of silver coins in exchange for his silence. He nodded absently, his mind seemingly elsewhere, and handed me a rusted key. As I climbed the stairs to my room, the boards creaking under my weight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak, every whisper of wind through the broken windows seemed amplified, as if the very walls were alive with unseen eyes. I reached my room and locked the door behind me, securing it with whatever I could find, a rickety chair, an old table, before collapsing onto the bed. I had no idea how long I slept, but when I awoke, the room was shrouded in darkness, save for a single beam of moonlight filtering through the cracked window. The silence was oppressive, and I could feel the cold seeping into my bones. Something was wrong. I sat up, my senses on high alert. The village outside was deathly quiet, too quiet. And then I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from the other side of the door. I froze, listening intently as the sound grew louder, more insistent. Someone or something was out there. I reached for my weapon, the cold steel comforting in my grip as I slowly approached the door. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural growl. My heart raced as I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear more. The growl deepened, more bestial, more unnatural. I knew that sound. It was the same growl I had heard in the throne room. I stepped back, my mind racing. The creature had found me. But how? And what did it want? I had no time to ponder these questions as the door suddenly shook violently, the wood splintering under the force of the creature's assault. It was trying to get in. Panic surged through me as I backed away, the only escape route a narrow window on the far side of the room. But before I could reach it, the door burst open with a deafening crash, and the creature lunged into the room, its eyes glowing with that same malevolent light. It was even more terrifying up close. Its body was twisted, a grotesque amalgamation of man and beast, with elongated limbs and sharp, jagged teeth that dripped with saliva. It was a creature born of nightmares, and it was coming for me. I fired my weapon, the sound deafening in the small room. The creature recoiled, but it was not wounded. Instead, it seemed enraged, its growls growing louder, more feral. It charged at me, and I barely managed to dive out of the way, the creature crashing into the wall where I had stood moments before. Desperation fueled my actions as I scrambled for the window, throwing it open and leaping into the night. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting up my leg as I struggled to my feet. The creature was right behind me, its eyes glowing in the darkness as it pursued me through the village. I ran, the cold air burning my lungs as I weaved through the narrow streets, the creature's growls echoing off the stone walls. I could hear it gaining on me, its claws scraping against the cobblestones as it closed the distance. I knew I couldn't outrun it for long. Just as I reached the edge of the village, a shadowy figure appeared in my path, blocking my escape. I skidded to a halt, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood. but I could sense the power emanating from it. This was no ordinary person. The figure raised a hand, and the creature stopped in its tracks, its growls turning to whimpers as it cowered before the newcomer. I watched in stunned silence as the figure approached the creature, placing a hand on its head. The creature trembled, then slowly began to shrink, its body contorting and twisting until it was nothing more than a small, withered husk on the ground. The figure turned to me, lowering its hood to reveal a pale, beautiful face, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. I recognized those eyes, the same eyes that had spared me in the throne room. "You've been searching for the heir," the figure said, its voice soft yet commanding. "And now you've found her." My blood ran cold as the realization hit me. The heir was not a child, not some innocent waiting to be claimed. The heir was a woman, powerful and ancient, and she had been hunting me just as I had been hunting her. "You are too late," she continued, a smile playing on her lips. "The throne is mine, and soon all will bow before me." She stepped closer, and I could feel her power, her darkness, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. But as I looked into her eyes, I felt something else, an emotion I hadn't expected, something that shook me to my core. Fear. The heir was closer than I had ever imagined, and now I was standing face to face with her. As she reached out a hand toward me, a sudden thought flashed through my mind, a thought I couldn't ignore. I had a choice to make. Would I kill her and end the bloodline, or use her power to destroy the vampire clans from within? But as her hand touched mine, I realized that the choice might not be mine to make. And in that moment, the true horror of what I had uncovered began to dawn on me. I had never known fear like this. Standing before the heir, my weapon useless in my trembling hands, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down on me. Her touch was cold, colder than the icy winds that whipped through the village, and it sent a shiver through my soul. She was no mere vampire. She was something far more ancient, far more powerful. And she had chosen me. The realization was a blade slicing through my thoughts, leaving me gasping for breath. How could I have been so blind? The whispers, the rumors, they had all pointed to a hidden child, a secret heir, but they had been wrong, or worse, deliberately misleading. The heir had been right under my nose the entire time, manipulating events from the shadows, playing the clans against each other. And now, she had come to claim what was rightfully hers. "Do you see now?" she whispered, her voice as soft as the night breeze but filled with a deadly edge. "You thought you could hunt me, but you were always my prey. I wanted to move, to fight, to run, but I was frozen in place, trapped by the intensity of her gaze. Her eyes, those impossibly dark eyes, held mine, and in them I saw the truth. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was destiny. A destiny I had unknowingly walked into the moment I set foot in Dracula's castle. "You have been searching for me," she continued, stepping closer until I could feel her breath on my face. "And now that you've found me, you will help me reclaim my throne." Her words echoed in my mind, a command that felt impossible to resist. But something inside me, a deep primal instinct, rebelled. I had spent my life fighting creatures like her, dedicating every waking moment to eradicating their kind from the earth. And yet as I stood there, I felt the foundation of everything I believed in start to crumble. "I won't help you," I managed to say, though my voice wavered with uncertainty. "I'll destroy you, just like I destroyed the others." She smiled, a slow predatory smile that sent a chill down my spine. "You can try," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "But you will fail, they all do." Before I could react, she moved, faster than anything I had ever seen. One moment she was in front of me, and the next, she was behind me, her hand gripping my throat with a strength that belied her slender frame. I struggled, clawing at her hand, but it was like trying to move a mountain. "You are strong," she murmured, her lips brushing against my ear. "But not strong enough." In a blur of motion, she flung me across the room. I hit the wall with a sickening thud, pain radiating through my body as I crumpled to the floor. Dazed and gasping for air, I watched as she approached, her movements graceful, almost hypnotic. "I could kill you now," she said, standing over me, her eyes glowing with that same eerie light. "But where would be the fun in that? No, I have something much more interesting in mind." She knelt down, her face inches from mine, and for a moment I thought she might kill me after all. But instead she leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered words that sent a jolt of terror through my heart. "You will help me, Hunter," she said, her voice a low, seductive purr. "Not because you want to, but because you won't be able to resist. I am your destiny, and you are mine." She stood up, leaving me on the floor, my mind reeling from her words. Destiny? What did she mean? How could I be tied to someone like her? A creature of darkness, of evil. But deep down, a part of me, some dark, hidden part, already knew the answer. I could feel it, like a shadow lurking in the corners of my mind, waiting for the right moment to strike. "You will come to me," she said, her voice echoing in the empty room as she turned to leave. "When the time is right, You will seek me out, and together we will claim what is ours." With that, she vanished into the night, leaving me alone in the wreckage of the inn, battered and broken, but alive. I had survived the encounter, but I knew that the true battle was only just beginning. I had to find a way to resist her, to fight the pull of whatever twisted bond she claimed we shared. But as I staggered to my feet, my body aching with every movement, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had already lost. Her words haunted me, echoing in my mind as I made my way through the darkened village, each step heavier than the last. I had come to Transylvania to hunt a vampire, to rid the world of a great evil, but now I wasn't sure if I was the hunter or the prey. The lines between the two had blurred, leaving me trapped in a web of destiny that I couldn't escape. The villagers were gone, vanished into the night as if they had never been there at all. The silence was deafening, oppressive, and I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on me from all sides. I needed to regroup, to plan my next move, but how could I fight something that seemed to know me better than I knew myself? As I reached the edge of the village, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned, my heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just shadows shifting in the moonlight. And then I saw it, a figure cloaked in darkness standing at the entrance to the forest. It was her, watching, waiting. I backed away, my heart racing, but I couldn't look away. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel her eyes on me, boring into my soul. She was waiting for me to make my move, to come to her, just as she had said I would. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty streets as I fled the village, the weight of her presence still heavy on my shoulders. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the forest, the trees closing in around me like a protective cocoon. But even here I couldn't escape her. The forest was alive with her presence. Her whispers carried on the wind, taunting me, tempting me. I pressed on, forcing myself deeper into the woods, hoping to put as much distance between us as possible. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun the truth. She was my destiny, and no matter how much I fought it, our fates were intertwined. The Heir had found me, and now there was no turning back. The hunt had only just begun, and I was no longer sure if I wanted to be the one doing the hunting. The days turned into weeks as I wandered the dense, mist-shrouded forests of Transylvania. The encounter with the Heir had left me shaken, my mind and body haunted by the memory of her cold touch and those dark, mesmerizing eyes. I had tried to keep moving, to outrun the destiny she claimed we shared, but the pull toward her was relentless, like an invisible thread binding us together. Despite my resolve to resist, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every night, as I sat by the fire in some hidden corner of the woods, her words echoed in my mind. "You will come to me." And every day I found myself drawing closer to her, my footsteps taking me back toward the castle, toward the place where it all began. But something inside me had started to change. The fear that once gripped me had begun to fade, replaced by a strange curiosity, a need to understand her, to know the truth about who she was and what she wanted. There was a connection between us, undeniable and powerful, and I could no longer ignore it. Finally, I made the decision that had been brewing in my heart since our last encounter. I would return to her, not as a hunter, not as an enemy, but as something more. I would find the Heir, and this time, I would let the truth guide my actions, whatever that truth might be. The journey back to the castle was eerily quiet, the forest seeming to part before me, as if it too knew the inevitability of my path. When I reached the ancient stone walls, they loomed before me like a monument to all my fears and uncertainties. But I pushed forward, my resolve stronger than it had ever been. The castle was just as I remembered it. Cold, dark, and filled with the weight of centuries of bloodshed and betrayal. But this time, I felt no fear as I walked through its halls, only a sense of purpose. I knew where to find her, and as I made my way to the throne room, I could feel her presence growing stronger, pulling me closer. The throne room was empty, save for the massive stone chair at its center. But as I stepped inside, she appeared as if summoned by my very thoughts. She stood by the throne, her dark cloak flowing around her like shadows given form. Her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw something I hadn't expected. Vulnerability. "You came," she said, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. "I had to," I replied, taking a step closer. "I needed to know the truth." She looked at me, a mixture of relief and sorrow in her gaze. "The truth," she echoed, her voice tinged with sadness. "The truth is, I never wanted this. I never wanted to be what I am." I stopped, taken aback by the raw emotion in her words. This was not the cold, calculating creature I had faced before. This was someone who had been burdened with a destiny she had never chosen. "I was born into this," she continued, her voice trembling. "Born to inherit a legacy of death and destruction, but I never wanted it. I never wanted to be a monster." Her words struck a chord deep within me. For so long, I had seen her as the enemy, a threat that needed to be eliminated. But now, I saw her as something else. A person, trapped by circumstances beyond her control. "You don't have to be," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "You don't have to follow in Dracula's footsteps. You can choose a different path." She looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. "You think that's possible?" "I do," I replied, stepping closer until we were face to face. "You have the power to change everything. You can bring an end to the bloodshed, to the wars between the clans. You can be the one who brings peace." She hesitated, her gaze searching mine as if trying to find the truth in my words. "But how? How can I do that when everyone expects me to be something else?" "By showing them who you really are," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "Not as Dracula's heir, but as someone who chooses to be better. Someone who chooses to be different." She looked down at our joined hands, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You believe in me," she whispered, as if the very idea was foreign to her. "I do," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "And I will stand by you no matter what. We can do this together." For a moment, we stood there in silence, the weight of our shared destinies pressing down on us. But then, slowly, she smiled. A genuine smile, filled with hope and a new sense of purpose. "Then let's end this," she said, her voice stronger now. "Let's end the war and bring peace to our world." Together, we left the castle, our steps echoing through the empty halls as we walked out into the night. The forest, once so dark and foreboding, seemed to welcome us now, the trees parting to reveal a path bathed in the light of the full moon. As we journeyed back to the heart of the vampire clans, we began to spread a message of peace, of unity. The clans, once bitter rivals, began to see the possibility of a future without bloodshed, a future where they could coexist. It wasn't easy. There were those who resisted, who clung to the old ways. But with time, the heir's vision began to take hold. And through it all, we grew closer, our bond deepening into something neither of us had expected. The connection between us, once so terrifying, became a source of strength, of comfort. I had come to Transylvania to hunt a monster, but instead, I had found someone I could love, someone who made me believe in a better future. In the end, we stood side by side as the vampire clans swore their allegiance to a new order, one built on peace and mutual respect. The throne, once a symbol of tyranny, was dismantled, its power dissolved into the earth. The legacy of Dracula was over, and in its place a new era had begun. As we stood on the balcony of the castle, looking out over the land that had once been ruled by fear, she turned to me, her eyes filled with warmth. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me, for giving me a chance." I smiled, pulling her into my arms. "Thank you for choosing a different path, for choosing love over power." And as we stood there, the moon shining down on us, I knew that we had not only changed the course of history, but we had also found something even more powerful: hope, love, and the promise of a future where we could be together, free from the shadows of the past. The hunter and the heir, united in a bond that would forever change the world. And in that moment, I knew that we had both found our true destiny, one that we would walk together hand in hand into a new dawn.